Happy Friday. A happy Friday for Dodger fans. I don't know if it's a happy Friday for Mets fans. We got a lot to get into on today's Mets Daily. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe, smash that thumbs up below, keep on commenting. We won't read your comments today because we just have too much to get into. And we have friend of the program back on the show, Ashley. Listen, it's been so long, I'm going to butcher the last name. WENSKOSKI.
Yes.
That's close enough. Make sure you subscribe to her show, Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast. That she does with our buddy Samantha Croston. She is also on CNY Central up in Syracuse. We didn't wake up with the $60 million a year offer. We didn't wake up getting paid, at present day, $14 million more dollars than Juan Soto, who is a much better player than that of Kyle Tucker, who actually has decided to join Evil Empire. Forget about the late 90s Yankees. They're a thing of the past. The Dodgers are the Evil Empire. And what they're doing, if you're not following, folks, will lead to a lockout next season. Like, there will be a new CBA. There will be a lockout. I think there will be a salary cap because I'm sure Rob Manfred might be smiling, but the Dodgers are the only fans smiling right now because what's happening. And obviously, it's the teams at the floor that are hurting as well, like the Pirates and the Marlins who don't spend. But across the board, it is bad for baseball. But I'll get your let's dive right into it. Ash, 4 years, $240 million. Kyle Tucker goes to the Dodgers, and the details are it's a $30 million deferral overall, which is a little bit less than I expected. It's a $64 million signing bonus. Opt-outs after year 2 and 3, and if I'm him, why the hell am I opting out of $60 million a year? He's not going to get that in a potential lockout next year or the year after, or is he going to get a team that's going to win a World Series multiple times like the Dodgers? $57.1 million a year in net present value after factoring deferrals, a record by $6 million plus. Actually, to me, this is a wild overpay. This isn't on the Mets. We'll get into the other layers of it. We got a lot of layers to get. This is going to be the onion episode of Mets Daily. But let's just start with how absurd of a contract is. The Mets offered 4 for $220 with no deferral, so you can argue the Mets offer present day value was better. They also offered a $75 million signing bonus. So present day, the Mets did pretty much all they can here. The Mets, the Blue Jays in the end, Ash, were used to get the price up for the Dodgers to swoop in out of nowhere and take him. And now he can go win a World Series and be the 10th best player in the Dodgers in sunny California.
Yeah, I mean, the whole time that his free agency process was going on, and especially I think as it ramped up in the last 48 hours or so before he signed, there was just something suspicious. I don't know if you felt it. I certainly felt it. It was all the reporting and all the stuff coming out from John Heyman and everybody on the beat was Mets and Blue Jays. And you're sort of the whole time like, well, what about the Dodgers? Because it was rumored that they were in the final three as well. And yet you didn't hear a peep about what was going on with the LA negotiations. I mean, I said it on our show last night. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. How can you be surprised at this point that players keep picking Los Angeles? I don't think you even blame the player necessarily, right? A guy like Kyle Tucker, they're going to pay him nearly $60 million a year. You said it, sunny Los Angeles, a place where he doesn't have to be the guy. He's very comfortably like the fifth option in that lineup, fourth or fifth option. And a place that players like to play, a place that they know they're in all likelihood going to win in the short term, So I kind of said last night, be mad at whoever you want, but don't necessarily be mad at Kyle Tucker, because if you were faced with the same choice, I'm not sure we all wouldn't do the same thing. The Mets ended up putting on the full court press for him, which I, in some senses, earlier last week and whatnot, was surprised by, but happy about, because I had thought Tucker was kind of the one big get that could really salvage everything that has been going on this offseason. Obviously, there are other pieces that I'm sure they will pivot towards, but Tucker sort of seemed like the big, splashy, all of a sudden you can silence some of the critics and some of the casuals that have been upset about the way the Mets offseason has gone down. But it didn't get it done. Like you said, I think the Mets offer was more front-loaded. Yeah, John Heyman said it was 60-60, 50-50, and no deferrals. It was 4 years, 220. What can you do, As a Mets fan this morning, I don't know if I speak for everybody, but I'm not upset that the Mets offered Kyle Tucker $50 to $60 million a year, and he turned it down. I mean, there's only so much you can do. I'll get into a little bit later a few of the reasons why I think they've been falling short this offseason in particular. But I think you and I can both agree Kyle Tucker is not a $60 million player. He's not even a $50 million player. Kyle Tucker is very good, but he's not a generational superstar talent, the likes of Ohtani and Soto and Judge. Like, it's a massive overpay no matter how you slice it.
I mean, there are multiple categories where Jorge Polanco had a better 2025 season than Kyle Tucker. And I get it's 1 year. I get Tucker dealt with some injuries. So did Polanco. But the reality is Kyle Tucker's nowhere near that. You can argue Kyle Tucker's not a $35 million a year player. And I understand you're worth what teams are willing to give you. But when you get in bidding wars and these things happen and you throw the Mets in there, the price starts to go up because the Mets will give you that money, maybe on a shorter term deal, but they will give you the AAV that's high while, not being committed to the long term, which is a big reason why they didn't want to bring back Pete, which I want to get into because a lot of fans are saying, this is why you should have brought back Pete. I see it all over. I want to get into that later because I gotta just let it rip, and you might need earplugs because my blood's starting to boil with the Pete Alonso stuff. I mean, it's turned into all fans look like me without the beard. We're all babies. Everyone's being babies. You're all me as a fetus. Me in present day, shaven Gillette. It's gotten out of control. So I want to get into that, but. I think I think we were all a little bit mad when Steve Cohen, I know it was all in good fun, but the fact he didn't sign there, the fact, a lot of fans right now are not renewing tickets. There's a lot of people who aren't going to show up, for the simple fact that Pete wasn't brought back, Diaz wasn't brought back. If you care about McNeil, you're a loser. I mean, Jeff McNeil sucks. Like, you just don't watch baseball if you're actually mad. I had someone tweet me, he choked, Lindor choked the squirrel. He's like, touch the squirrel, you should never come back. I'm like, that sentence is like out of an Onion article. Like, it's so ridiculous. But Steve Cohen tweeted the tweets last night. Let me know when you see smoke. Now, listen, at first I didn't understand it. I am Jewish, so I don't know much about the Pope or the Vatican. I understood later on as everyone tweeted me, this is about the Pope, you're an idiot, okay, whatever. And then he followed it up, maybe to people like me who quoted it. For those who don't understand the Pope election reference, at Jake Brown Live, he didn't say that, but follow me anyway. We are waiting for a decision. That's all I know. And what was it, like an hour after that? Now, I'm always up late. You're up late working. The Knicks were playing the Warriors last night as well. I was on live as the Tucker watch was going on, and then it happened and went back on TikTok live. I think that rubbed some people the wrong way. It's like now is not the time for Uncle Steve to really be snarky when you need an outfielder, a frontline starter, and a little bit more help on this roster. We all could have lived without that. And I think that's maybe one of the things you're talking about when you talk about you don't like how this offseason played out, obviously the other factors. But, I know you weren't too happy either about that Uncle Steve tweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was unnecessary. Listen, I'm not going to lie. He had me in the first half. I saw that tweet. I knew the Pope reference, and I kind of was like, why would Steve Cohen be tweeting that if he didn't think the deal was done or almost done? Why would he be taking to social media with the way that he knows Mets fans are on watch for this deal right now? But that wasn't the case. And I would venture to think Steve Cohen probably found out with the rest of us or shortly before the rest of us that Kyle Tucker was going elsewhere. I don't mind. Here's the thing. I actually enjoy at times Steve Cohen's candor and at times transparency on social media, right? You don't have a lot of billionaire baseball owners tweeting from their personal accounts throughout baseball or throughout any major sport, to be honest with you. So I like that he does that at times. For me, this was a situation of you got to read the room this offseason, and you got to know where your very passionate, very starved for success fan base is at. I've said this on our show, and I'll say it here. What has bothered me the most about the way the past couple of months have gone down for the Mets has really been nothing to do with the X's and O's of who they've gotten, who they haven't gotten. I could have done without Diaz walking, but some of that stuff you can't control. He wanted to be a Dodger. Okay. It's less about who they've lost and who they've lacked, bringing in. It's more about the way the optics have felt throughout this whole thing. I kind of thought that when Steve Cohen bought the team, he brought, a lot of things. He brought money. He certainly brought hope. And I thought he brought more of an optics PR shift from the way the Wilpons and Sandy Alderson had done things in the past. the past couple of months, I think, have proved me and fans wrong in that area because, you saw everything with the Soto signing go down last year. They had that very tight, very unlocked. It came out that night that they had signed him. There wasn't rumors and smoke everywhere. And then the past couple months, just the way things have sort of happened. It hasn't been that they've happened, it's been the way that they've happened. And I feel that way about Kyle Tucker again. The tweet was unnecessary. The stuff with Diaz, it comes out they weren't given a chance to counteroffer. The stuff with Pete, David Stearns is very nonchalant about. I just wish there was some more, I guess, organizational transparency and let's face it, the Mets have been, LOL Mets for our whole lives. And I thought Steve Cohen had sort of been changing that. I hate to say it, but putting out a tweet about a guy that you came in second place to, an hour before he signs is kind of giving LOL Mets.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Cohen has got to be smarter in that sense because fans are jumping off a cliff. And I hate to use that wording, but it feels in baseball fandom terms, they are jumping off a cliff right now, and they're not happy. Like I said, they're not going to attend games. The attendance will not be the same. No matter what happens the rest of the offseason, there are fans who, comment on my videos, that comment on Mets Daily, and keep on commenting. We love it, but there are a lot of you that are saying, I will not spend a dime on this team. He did this for the casino. It was all a sham, which that argument to me is comical because the Mets need to be successful for people to want to go to games that will end up at them going to the casino and spending money. So, that's dumb to me. But, yeah, I mean, this hasn't been the greatest offseason. And as many people want to call me a Stearns, Cohen, Mets shill, I'm not a shill. I'm just an even keel guy right now because I know how much money this team still has left to spend. And I know the present-day roster is not the opening day roster. If the Mets rest of their offseason, Ashley, if it's Austin Hayes and a trade for Chris Bubik, then yes, I will be very mad if that's the remainder of their offseason. That would be a national tragedy if that's the rest of their offseason. But the reality is that they are going to have to go big fish hunting via trade. That's what it's going to come down to. Unless they're signing Bellinger for a lot, which would be the pivot, and they're signing Framber, I think a Bellinger-Frambo combo would be very nice. You're talking about positional flexibility. You're talking about a frontline starter who can eat 200 innings a year, which they badly need. Those would be two big boy moves here. After that, when you talk about free agency, there is not much left. There is not, at the top of the food chain, there are not many free agents left. And I think that's where now fans are panicking. And then the other element to this, now that he went to the Dodgers, and listen, I don't agree with this philosophy, and I want to hear what you think, is the Mets should not trade any prospects because they're not going to win this year. They should just, at this point, play the kids if they're not going to win. You're not going to punt in New York City, when you're coming off a year where you had record fan base. You're not going to lose that momentum by just playing a bunch of prospects. Now, I think Benj is going to play. Benj is going to start, Taylor maybe a few weeks, but Benj is going to be a starting left fielder or center fielder. But you're not going to just play kids or sign Austin Hayes and then put a kid out there. It's just you can't operate that way anymore. That in New York City, maybe like the 2003 Mets could have done that, but the 2026 Mets cannot. So, your thoughts on the trade market and the philosophy that some fans who are like, you know what? Why am I trading prospects for a rental if we're not going to win this year anyway? I don't love that philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the negotiations here did show us one thing, which I think we knew, but maybe some more pessimistic Mets fans didn't want to admit. I had a lot of people saying earlier in the offseason, they're doing a full rebuild. You just got to admit it to yourself, it's a rebuild. And I was like, no, it's not. Here's the thing. Obviously, they did a tear down in terms of the core and letting some of those guys go and changing things up. But to call it a full rebuild sort of just proves to me that you don't know what a full rebuild is. I mean, you still have two probably Hall of Fame players in your lineup in Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. They're changing their strategy. And yes, I think they are trying to get younger and they will let some of the young guys play to a degree, but it's not a full rebuild in the traditional sense. And I think that the Tucker negotiation showed us that because you're not all in on a guy like Kyle Tucker if you're doing a full rebuild. So I definitely think that they're going to have to pivot. I still think Bellinger could be a fit, especially since, he and the Yankees appear to be out of stalemate. He certainly fits what they need in their lineup and what they need positionally. So if Bellinger isn't an overpay, open to that. But I don't think it's a situation where the Mets are punting on 2026. We all know the Dodgers are going to win the World Series again. The Dodgers very well may three-peat. But even last year, with a very similar team, pretty much aside from Edwin Diaz and aside from now Kyle Tucker, the Dodgers didn't have a perfect, phenomenal regular season. The Dodgers played in the wild card round. The Dodgers had their trials and tribulations to get there last year and were almost smoked by, the teams along the way. Like, we saw how the postseason was not a linear trajectory for them, even with, a great team on paper. So I think to just sit here and say in January the Dodgers are going to three-peat and nobody else has a shot is just foolish and silly. Yes, the Dodgers appear to be the best team in baseball on paper, but how many times have we seen that fall through,
Yeah, and listen, just because the Dodgers are the favorite doesn't mean you just quit. You don't just quit on your team because of that. So I think this can still be a very successful offseason for the Mets. Cody Bellinger, the latest on him as we're recording this, the Yankees would include a big signing bonus, no deferrals, 5 years in the 155 to 160 million range. He wants 7 years. I don't think he's going to get 7. I think him wanting 7 is saying, hey, Mets, do you want to swoop in here? I think Cody Bellinger comes down to the Mets or Yankees. Like you said, you don't want to overpay for Bellinger. I would agree. It's funny. Cody Bellinger had a far better season than Kyle Tucker and is going to end up with far less money than Kyle Tucker, which is, I'm not saying that Tucker's not better, but when you look at the best of both Jorge Polanco and Cody Bellinger's career, their numbers were far better in a different stratosphere than Kyle Tucker. So Kyle Tucker's best do not touch Cody Bellinger or even Jorge Polanco's best. And I understand Jorge Polanco is not the same player, but them at their peak has been better than what Kyle Tucker's been. So the name is sexy, the name is big, but the reality is he did not want to come to New York. You're watching Mets Daily. I'm Jake Brown. She's Ashley WENSKOSKI. Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast. Ashley Wensk TV at Jake Brown Live. Smash that thumbs up. Comment. The Pete Alonso thing. Let me touch on this here.
Let's hear it.
I am so sick and tired. While I say this, can you pull up I'll pull it up. The date he signed. So I know how. Let me see. Pete Alonso signing. He signed. Let me get the exact date. Right? It was December. It was December 11th. So as we sit here, folks, about 5 weeks since Pete Alonso signed his gargantuan contract, overpay, many would say, of 5 years, $155 million with the Baltimore Orioles, with the only team that wanted him. There was no other offers. It was the Mets didn't give an offer. You can argue the Mets should have gave an offer out of respect. That's fine. I'm not going to fight you on that. Maybe they should have. People have got to stop crying, saying the Mets should have just brought back Diaz and Pete. Diaz wanted to go to LA. He didn't come back to the Mets. His wife wanted to go there. The family wanted to go there. They wanted to be in Hollywood. They wanted to win. Pete Alonso was not liked by many teammates on this team. And once people understand that behind the scenes, Pete Alonso wasn't this angel saint, the quicker it will get in people's heads that the Mets had no interest in bringing him back for other reasons outside of just home runs and money and contractually and his defense and run prevention. Fans are under the impression they didn't bring back Pete because he's not a good defender. There was too much money. Stingy Stearns didn't want to go to 5 years. He is 31. He is not going to age well. You're going to see. He's not going to fall off a cliff like Chris Davis, but Pete Alonso is not going to be a 50-homer hitter for the next 5 seasons. You're going to see his numbers regress. He's going to eventually be a DH. He did not want a DH here because he was an egomaniac. I was told he was an egomaniac who thought he run the ship in New York City. And the Mets want different personalities, and they want winners. That was part of the reason they moved on. So if you're still crying about Pete, I get it. The offseason has not transpired how you liked it. But it's 2 months from opening day. So I don't want to hear Pete Alonso's freaking name anymore of why you hate the Mets, why you hate Stearns. I get you understand. You love Pete. I get it. He was a good Met. They didn't win shit with him. They won 0 pennants with Pete Alonso. They made this decision to move on from the core. You have to live with that. If you were happy with the 2025 Mets, you're an idiot. They sucked. If you're happy that Pete Alonso had great numbers, you suck as a person. Who cares that he had good numbers? The team fucking sucked. They finished with 83 wins. So they need to pivot. They need to get better. They need to replace Pete. I understand that. But to still yell and scream like this about Pete Alonso, like I'm doing about anti-Pete Alonso right now, it's making me my blood boil. We're like children crying about this, Ashley. And I get he was a lovable man. I get we liked him. But the Mets have moved on from lovable players. They moved on from Seaver, Doc, Darryl. They moved on from Mike Piazza. They've moved on from all the Mets greats. It happens. It's part of life. 7 years here outside of Candelita saving this team in 2024. By the way, the team was terrible before he got there. Cough, cough, Pete Alonso in the worst season of his life. So, he had one season here where the Mets won and they lost in the wild card round outside of 2024. So I don't want to think he brought this winning culture. He brought this attitude. He brought, I'm going to win the home run derby. I'm going to be the polar bear. I'm going to sign down goes Darryl on the ball when I beat him for a meaningless home run record for a franchise that has a 252 homer record, which is a laughing stock to the rest of the league. So stop crying about Pete. You can be mad about David Stearns and how the Mets offseason has gone, but we have to put the Pete thing, Ashley, behind us. It's 5 weeks old. He's gone. Get over it and stop being a baby.
Yeah, I agree. Mets fans that are still crying over Pete and Diaz to an extent and Nimmo, it's just like, it's time to move on. It's time to turn the page. Like you said, I think their strategy was very clear and some people may not understand, and that's okay. But we're saying, some of these guys, Pete and I wouldn't call Nimmo a problem by any means, or McNeil had his trials and tribulations. There was clubhouse and cultural shifts for why they let some of these guys go. And sorry, there is a siren going by. And you have to just understand, you have to live with that. Like you said, on Alonso, it's been 5 weeks, right? We're pivoting for his replacement. They made a full court press for Tucker. Okay, now is it Bellinger? Pete Alonso is in Baltimore and everybody is probably better off for it. Could it have went down in a little bit of a better sense? Maybe. Do I think that maybe they could have given him an offer just to give him an offer and again quell some of this PR stuff just for that, I guess, respect model? Sure, that would have quieted some people. But at the end of the day, David Stearns and Steve Cohen showed that they didn't really care about that. And so as a Mets fan, you have to live with that one way or the other.
And now it's time to get serious because now is the time, Tucker's off the board. Now it's time to get serious about addressing this roster. And I understand that. I'm not saying this Mets team looks good, but we got to stop looking back to the past to a bunch of losers. And I know that's mean, but they were losing freaking players. And, you say Brandon Nimmo was a problem, but, the whole thing, he wanted to be captain and, you're Brandon freaking Nimmo. You haven't sniffed an all-star game. You're not going to sniff the Hall of Fame. Like, you're just a fun guy. You were great, but that's what you were. You were what you were. Half your career, you were hurt. You had two really good seasons. Not great. 2 good seasons. The rest of your career, you barely played or you ran a first base and a walk. Your OBP went down. You became a power hitter that hit 230. Like, you are what you are, Brandon Nimmo. The Mets got rid of that contract. Great move. Jeff McNeil was a problem in the clubhouse. And, the Mets are building around 2 Hall of Famers. That's what they're doing. They're building around 2 Hall of Famers. One of them who's been to the playoffs 6 times. The other one has a World Series championship and also has won a pennant in the American League. They're building a winner. And it might not look like that because right now this is not a winning team probably. It's probably a 500 team. But the doom and gloom, I understand you're mad, but let's see what happens now. And what do? Now, I texted my buddy a little bit ago. He said, Jake the GM, what's your ideal offseason? Here are my 3 scenarios, and I want to get your reaction and what might be your dream scenarios. A, and I mention him every day on this show. It's like this is going to be calling the Mets Yandy, the Yandy Mets daily show. Yandy Diaz, Jaron Duran, Framber Valdez. That was my A off season. You get your DH/first baseman, you get your outfielder, and you get your ace, and that's about $50 million. You get 3 players for less than what you were going to pay Kyle Tucker. To me, if you can pull those 2 trades, that's a no-brainer, and your team is far better, and I'm very excited if that's the case. B, this one's a little bit different, a name I haven't thrown out there yet, Ashley. A trade for Peralta, but in that Peralta trade, you also acquire the Hebrew Hammer, Christian Yelich. A Yelich-Peralta combo package. Yelich coming off a great season. He's got 3 years left on his contract. With a mutual 4th-year option. And then Yandy as well, but that would be 2 trades. I just love Yandy. C, Peralta McGill package and you sign Bellinger. Do you like any of those? And do you have like an ideal duo or trio that you would like in the rest of the offseason?
I like the last one and I like the first one. Peralta McGill package. I mean, obviously that shores up two areas of need for you. Come join his brother in New York and then sign Bellinger as well. I love your Yandy idea and I have for a while because you've been very in on that for a while and I've seen that on socials and whatnot. Who are you giving up for Yandy? Like, what does that trade look like?
I would think I don't think it would take Sproat. And here's, the Rays, to me, as the days go on, it feels like Yandy more expendable because right after that deal happened, the Rays are traded Josh Lau or Lau, however, they traded Lowe and Lau, the law firm in Tampa. So Lowe and Lau are gone. I got to think Yandy becomes expendable with a year and then that option second year. I would say it would probably take like Luis Angel Acuna, maybe Jacob Reimer and Will Watson as the trio. I would think that would be they get a middle infielder to replace who they've lost. Acuna's tearing up winter ball. Now, who knows? He had another homer yesterday. He's got 13 homers in winter ball. He's just raking. He had 0 all year for the Mets. Very bizarre. But can you stomach that? Can you stomach Acuna, Watson, Reimer, or say Acuna, Reimer, maybe they ask for a pitcher, Wenninger? Is that too much?
I mean, I think if that's the package, I think you do it right now. I think Luis Angel Acuna is a good player. Honestly, we've gotten to see him a lot here in Syracuse because he spent a lot of the summer a couple years ago down here. But I think when you look at, the amount of infield depth that the Mets currently have, I do think he's probably the one that's expendable right now. So I think if that's the package for Yandy, I think if you're the Mets, you sign up for that tomorrow.
So do you have a trio? Like you sign up for one of those? Do you have Ashley Stearns a trio package as president of Mets baseball operations?
I mean, I like the Yandy idea. Honestly, I like that more than Bellinger. If you can't pull that off and you don't want to do a trade, then I think the obvious pivot is to Bellinger, but certainly not for 7 years and certainly not for an average annual value that he's not worth. And then Valdez seems to be, the big time free agent pitcher left on the market, but that can't be an overpay either. I think what you have to be careful of here if you're the Mets is you've gone about this offseason now in the way that you wanted to do things, I should say. You haven't been in the race for anybody that you weren't interested in. You have cut costs in terms of shedding some payroll, in terms of the guys who left. So if that's what they're looking to do, now I wouldn't make a rash, impulsive decision and say, hey, we're just going to overpay Cody Bellinger and Valdez because we missed out on Kyle Tucker. Like that to me would be silly. You can sign both of those guys, but I think to deals that make sense for you and make sense for the direction that the organization is headed, to just toss around money to guys that aren't worth it is not really a great strategy. And honestly, even with the Tucker stuff, I said it at the beginning and I'll say it again. I wanted them to get Kyle Tucker, but $55 million a year. Would we have been sitting here celebrating today? Probably, but I think there would have been a caveat.
There would be fans saying, Ashley, it's not our money, it's Cohen's money. But in the reality, we'd be thinking to ourselves, we are going to get almost nothing else now because we just spent all the money. Because the Mets are around 295, 300. They said they'll go to 350. They would blow through it. They're not going to get to the Dodgers $417 million now, which is just bonkers. But we would have said, it's not our money. Great. We got the team better. But we would have been like, are we really paying this guy more than Juan Soto?
I think the point is, like, if you're David Stearns, you have to pick a lane, and you've picked it for the large majority, right? You're making the team better, but you're doing it the way you want to, focusing on defense, making these shorter term contracts, for these guys that make sense. So now I guess my point is you have to stick to that, even for any other free agent you might bring in.
The other intriguing option is signing Eugenio Suarez. You talk about replacing Pete. There's your replacement. You want to clamor about Pete Alonso's 40 homers. Well, Eugenio Suarez could hit you 50. His best seasons, he's hit more than Pete Alonso some years. So you sign Suarez, you put him at DH, you play him at third against lefties, you sit Beatty against lefties maybe, and you play him at third there. I understand he's not as good defensively. You trade for Brenton Doyle, a name that's come out with the Rockies. He had a bit of a down year last year, but he also lost an unborn child in April. I think mentally it wasn't all the way there. 2024, 2023, the guy went back-to-back Gold Gloves. So you want to talk about run prevention. How about you bring in a two-time Gold Glover? I understand he's not a thrilling name, But you have Benj, Doyle, Soto is a decent outfield defensively, maybe outside of Soto, but Doyle and Benj, you would think good defensively. You sign Suarez DH, and then you either trade for Peralta or you sign Framber. I think that's an intriguing offseason too. You get Suarez on a short-term deal. You get him like maybe 2 years, $50 million. You get Doyle only costs $3 million. It's a trade, so you got to figure out what it would take to get him. I don't think it would cost the world to get him. And then maybe the big package is trading for Peralta. Maybe you get Peralta, McGill, Doyle, Suarez. I think that is a home run right there. I think there are ways that the Mets can still have a home run. And that's why, I want you Met fans watching this. Let's all breathe together. Opening day. I'll see you there. Year 23 in a row with my father. The tradition continues. It'll be the weekend I move back to New York City. It'll be a gracious, glorious weekend with me and my dad, packing our bags, moving back to the Big Apple. Mom, Donnie Brown, 2026. The Mets are back. It is 2 months away. If you think David Stearns going in with signing an Austin Hayes and, signing Lucas Giolito and that's it, he knows that there will be he knows his life might be in danger if that's his offseason, if he's seen in the streets of New York City. He knows that will not fly. He knows that tickets will resume to $4, more than just the $5 Hot Dog Tuesday. Tickets will be $5 every day if that's his offseason. And I think Steve Cohen knows. And that's why the Mets went balls to the wall to offer Tucker what was already a gargantuan deal, because they realize they have to make a splash. Splashes can still be made, guys. And it might part ways with some prospects, but that's the other layer of this. The Mets have good prospects that if they move few, they will. If they move Sproat, they'll still have Tong and Wenninger. If they move Wenninger, they'll still have Sproat and Tong. Like if they move Reimer, you still have Jet Williams, you have Benj, you have Acuna. Like there are so many names in this system. There's a reason they're regarded in the top 5 in the sport, and ESPN gave them number 1. ESPN, notorious Mets haters, ranked them number 1. The starting pitching, I get people are mad about that, but people also got to realize this, Ashley. Like, starting pitching year in and year out varies. The Mets have a new pitching coach. They'll have a new philosophy. They have 8 starting pitchers on paper right now, and I understand a lot of them couldn't eat innings, but you have to remember, you have a full year now of Nolan McLean. You have Christian Scott is ready. Christian Scott is ready to go for spring training. He was regarded as the number 1 Mets prospect at one point. Sean Manaea, you would figure, is going in healthy. The guy was not healthy all last season. They didn't pay Sean Manaea the deal to be a 3-inning pitcher. He was hurt last year. He's back. Clay Holmes now has a year as a starter under his belt. Kodai Senga, if he's healthy, is a frontline starter for a lot of teams. Now, if he's healthy, it's a big deal. He can still be moved. David Peterson is in a walk year where he's about to get a bag after this year. You think he's not going to be motivated to have another all-star season, and for a full season, not just the first half? So I know it's doom and gloom when it comes to the rotation in this team, but I got to remind people, top prospects are coming. Benj is coming. Ryan Clifford is probably a year away. You have elite starting pitching in this system that is coming that I'm just not ready to enter, Ash, doom and gloom mode, because maybe I'm the only one left, but I have faith in Cohen and Stearns to put packages together to get the right guys and get this ship turned around, as bleak as it looks right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point in terms of the system, right? They're like you said, number 1 farm system in baseball last summer, top 5 by all accounts this offseason. So obviously some of those young guys are going to be plug and play this year. Some of them are not, like you said, but I think having the organizational structure where it is right now with the talent down on the farm only benefits you, because whether that's a trade now in the offseason in January or February before things get rolling, all right, great. You have the pieces to make that trade. Or that could be a trade at the trade deadline. You have the pieces to make that trade. So I think where the farm is certainly, a big benefit. And it's also a big credit to Steve Cohen and less so David Stearns, because he's been here, for about a year or two less. But the way that they turned that around, the Mets certainly did not have a top 5 farm system in baseball when Cohen bought the team. So that sort of stuff you can give him credit for. And I think that at some point fans are going to accept that all this talent, we're talking about, you got Sproat, you got Tong. Do they start the year in Syracuse? Maybe. All right, beyond that, some of the position players, Clifford, Jet Williams, if they're playing down here in AAA this spring, at some point, you have to see what you have with all those guys. And I'm not saying that they're going to punt on 2026 and just let all the young kids play. I don't think that. But if you're excited about these prospects, at some point you got to know what you've got, you know?
In 2019, Pete came up and did his thing. Who says Carson Bench can't come up here and tear the league up? Who says Nolan McLean's not going to win Rookie of the Year because he is eligible? Like, who says those two alone don't come up here and change the course of the franchise? And when you have Hall of Famers, when you have leadership, and it was talking about in an interview how Marcus Semien would take guys out to team dinners and beers, and how good of a leader he was in Texas. A just integral piece to this Mets team that I would not overlook. Marcus Semien. I get his bat is slowed down. The guy just won a Gold Glove. He's a Gold Glover and a leader. To overlook Jorge Polanco's versatility, and I get he's only played one game at first base. Guys, Daniel Vogelbach played first base at one point, and he is a large man. It's not the hard. Pete Alonso played a decent enough first base. I think Jorge Polanco will be fine just playing first base if they don't get someone like my guy Yandy Diaz, which I still want. So there are good things happening in Queens, and I know it seems dark, but I want to talk those fans off the ledge on this episode. And let's see what happens next. Looking forward to it. On Monday's show, we will have Matthew Cerrone, the creator of Mets Blog, which was a site that I lived on, and a guy that brought me in early on in his career, who watches the show. So, Matt, if you're watching, we'll talk to you on Monday, Martin Luther King Day. And if you're not watching Why Am I a Mets Fan Pod, you should. Make sure you go subscribe to them on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Follow Ashley Wensk TV. Now, I just realized in the Twitter, I didn't add the S. It was a tight squeeze. So make sure you add an S. Ashley Wensk TV on there. We'll fix that. Ashley, let's just believe. You got to believe. Now, people are going to say you guys have to do shows, so you have to keep some positivity. But, hey, we could just yell and scream every week. Like, we could do that if we wanted, right?
I absolutely think so. I think we're trying not to be the negative, pessimistic Mets fans out here.
Yeah, there's too many of that, and I just think they have too many resources for us to be jumping off a cliff. Like, there's
Totally.
just they got 50 million plus till they hit 350. Like, the math won't math to tell you that it's going to be like Giolito, Austin Hayes. Like, it just can't be. So we'll see. I think they're going to end up overspending, to be honest, on Bellinger. That's just my gut, is that he takes a shorter term high AV deal, but we'll find out here in the coming weeks. But I think at this point we want to move. We're just sick and tired of waiting around. Ashley, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for it's been good to catch up. Obviously, tough times in Mets land, but in the end, we'll power through. A lot of people tweet me. They probably commented you. I'm done with this team. I'm not a fan. Orange and blue till we die, baby. Orange and blue all the way.
You got to believe. Time's ticking down. Pitchers and catchers in like a month here. I'm ready to go. Hopefully the Mets are too.
I'm ready to go down to Florida, get this fat Brazilian bum cream, Sol de Janeiro infused. I'm getting my buddy's giving me a new bottle next week. I want to be infused with a bright future in Metsland. I want to be there in the beginning of March with Yandy Diaz on my team. I'm just gonna hug him. Like, I might when Yandy's in that, I'm just saying, bro, I've been supporting you. I might need a translator. I might need to bring Figgy with me and go to the Nelson Figueroa Spanish Academy and tell Yandy I love you. Me amo Yandy. Maybe is that how you say in Spanish? Do you know any Spanish?
So.
Is that it? Yeah.
I know. I'm not a Spanish speaker.
Me amo Yandy. Me amo Freddie Peralta. Me amo Trevor McGill. And let's cook. Ashley, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. We'll talk to you Monday. Smash that thumbs up. Subscribe. Peace.